I need to do some housekeeping first. And dare I first say the first one is a fire alarm. Black humour. There is no fire alarm tests for today. So if we do hear a fire alarm, then we'll exit either through those doors or there's a fire exit down here. In relation to teas and coffees, the hotel has supplied them, but Signature Living, as you may have seen in the press recently, have been collaborating with the Mayor's office to try and address the issue of homelessness on our streets of Liverpool. We've set up a crisis shelter. So there is a donation box by the side of teas and coffees, and if you'd like to put the odd pound or two into the donation box, then that will go to our homeless shelter today. I'd first of all like to thank you all for coming, but most importantly I'd like to thank you, Matthew, who has organised this. A huge amount of work and effort has gone into it, and we're all deeply grateful for that. Matthew's mum, Lynn, is at the back, and Lynn, you should be very proud of your son. So 30 James Street, it's quite ironic that we should end up in this hotel, because this is a hotel which is not adverse to tragedy. As we know, the Titanic, when that went down, this was the home of the Titanic. This is where the Titanic was drawn up. The reserves of gold and money were stored in the basement here. So it's a very historic hotel. And what's really important is that despite the adversity which this building has seen, which includes it having a direct hit in the First World War and surviving, and that brings us back to one of the questions about building performance, because we'll be looking at that in relation to the Echo Arena. The people who were most oppressed by the sinking of the Titanic were those who had little or no voice, and they took on the big ship owners. And similarly, as we know, we've seen that there has been, in recent times, people who have been suffered as a result of the Hillsborough. And they continue to fight, I get very emotional about Hillsborough. They continue to fight government, the media, about wrongdoings that had happened to them, and they eventually won. So why I'm using those as an analogy is because we as a group have a strong voice, and we need to make sure that collectively we make the right decisions for our group. And the reason that I've spoken today is because of this. There is a number of recommendations which came out of the Hillsborough investigation. It was a 27-year ordeal, and it resulted in findings that should apply to all investigations, including public bodies and innocent victims of the public. And those recommendations included the disparity for legal funding for the haves and the have-nots. The police officers and public bodies have a duty of candour and to act with full cooperation. To remove institutional deafness. To be open and honest and transparent in their dealings with victims. And not to mislead the public or indeed the media. Now, these recommendations are being cascaded down into the Grenfell inquiry, which I know has also taken a close interest in this fire, in particular the performance of the building. You and I went to an event. We parked our cars safely, and as a result of no fault of our own, we have suffered losses. The degree of those losses vary, but in particular, all of us have suffered some emotional loss and certainly financial loss. I have read, as you have, some of the most emotional and upsetting messages on the Facebook page. The lady whose mother has 2 weeks to live and is on a limited mileage on her hire car. The family whose child cries to bed every night as her toy rabbit that she's had since she was a baby is still not returned, despite her car seemingly being intact on level 2. The family who lost their late father's sentimental possessions. Bob Champion and a lifetime of irreplaceable images. And the frustration of car owners whose cars seem, on the face of it, recoverable. These and more of these people are in a difficult financial position, facing years of unaffordable premiums increases and some with post-traumatic stress. Those who've lost possessions and those frustrated by an inability to access potentially unharmed possessions from cars. As I said, I'm an MD and I'm a barrister, but I was foremost a witness to this, and it's affected me and it's affected my family. And since then, I've been interviewed by lawyers and given statements for not only the insurers of the source vehicle, but also the insurers of the car park, Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, and I've been contacted by many different firms of lawyers who wish to act on our behalf. I have probably an understanding of who the defendants will be and how long this process will take, and any suggestion by any lawyer that this will be an easy and risk-free process is wrong. This is a process that is currently estimated as a potentially 3 to 4 year period of litigation, with an estimated loss totalling around £70 million. Where we position ourselves within that matrix of litigation is vitally important. We need a firm of lawyers that can compete with the defendants' firms that have been instructed. And currently those firms are all within the top 10 sets of lawyers in the country. I, like you, are very grateful to MPG for trying to fill this void. But before we sign on the dotted line, I just need us all to understand the full landscape. We need representation that has a deep understanding and a proven track record of complex insurance litigation in class action cases. A clear understanding to all plaintiffs before we sign up of what it means of a no-win, no-fee. I've had experience of this. It's a glossy slogan that's usually marketed to entice people to sign. It should actually come with a health warning. As the process goes on a long journey for some litigants, litigation fatigue will set in. Implications will then result on the rest of the group as potentially people drop out. A small offer along the way of that horrendous litigation journey may then be offered by the defendant's solicitors. And there will then be pressure asserted upon us to settle. Because once the claim is settled, the lawyers who represent us get their fee. So if we all claimed, and for each of our claims, the fees associated with that was, say, £5,000 per plaintiff, on 1,400 of us, that's a £7 million paycheck to whichever lawyer represents us. So this is not an insignificant case. So it may be that MPG are the right lawyers, but due diligence needs to be carried out. And this is probably the most singular important question as a group that you will ever have to be asked. Who is the right firm to represent us based upon experience and sector specialisation? There is a number of lawyers within the group, but that doesn't mean that the number of lawyers should make the answer. I make a suggestion today, and the suggestion is that we should form a small steering group, only 3 or 4 people selected from the group or nominated from the group. And those 3 or 4 people have no personal connections with any law firm. And we complete due diligence on the potential firms who wish to take up this claim on our behalf. And we then make a recommendation back to you within a timescale of perhaps 3 to 4 weeks. This is a decision that has to be made away from this forum. It should be a matter of private debate, with the affected persons given full and impartial advice as to which lawyers should represent us. In relation to the potential parties who may end up being involved in litigation, that of course involves ACC, Liverpool City Council, the insurers of the source vehicle, Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, and WG Management. And they were responsible by the Liverpool International Horse Show for some aspects of fire and safety. But I'm going to propose this today because I'm delighted that Liverpool City Council have come today. Let's talk to us. Let's see if we can avoid litigation. We are in the whole scheme of this litigation a fractional amount, but we're a very important fractional amount. And although we may be small, we have a strong voice. And we will insist that the rules of fairness and natural justice prevail, and that those who have suffered financial loss or emotional harm will be compensated, and that there should be full cooperation with all parties, including ourselves and insurers, and we should not be hiding behind exclusion of liability notices in car parks. We are made of stronger stuff. I've spoken to MPG today who accept that if you've already filed a statement with them, as you are currently not signed up as clients, that with your permission that material will be shared and returned to a centralised point. And I'm very grateful for them for that on that professional matter. So my suggestion to you today, and it's only my suggestion, is that we put a small steering group together who are impartial and independent and report back to us as the way to obtain proper representation. And I end on this. This is not a witch hunt. An event happened. It was a catastrophic event of which we've all been affected by, but we need resolution. And these people need resolution, not only financially, but emotionally as well. And the quicker that closure can happen on this event, the better for everybody. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can I just say it's quite an honour, really, to be in front of you today. And I want to start by saying my name's Colleen Martin. I'm Assistant Director Supporting Communities at Liverpool City Council. And the reason I say it's an honour is because actually it gives me the privilege of hearing your concerns, your issues directly, and I can take those back and ensure that your voice is represented in all of the plans that we have to make as Liverpool City Council and as partners. I want to start by saying I and the Council have every sympathy with everyone who's been affected by the fire. As Sue has mentioned, it was a catastrophic incident and it was unprecedented. And I won't say I completely understand, but I do understand to an extent the emotional impact, not just the physical loss of a belonging, but the emotional impact it has, because someone close to me actually has a vehicle in the car park. So I know the impact that it has had on people. I'm here to the best of my ability to answer your questions. I will be honest with you from the start that I cannot necessarily answer all of the questions that you have, because many of them we share. This is a difficult and challenging process because even now the structure remains unstable and dangerous. And that means we have to take every precaution to not just make it safe, but actually to consider and to look at how we can do whatever the future holds in terms of how we can do everything safely and effectively. And that includes potentially recovering vehicles that might still be in the car park that are intact. But what I can't necessarily give you is today is all of the answers that you're looking for. What I hope is that this will be the first of a discussion, of a series of discussions where we can give you more and more of those answers to those questions as we find out the information. So quite genuinely, I will not be telling you any less than I will tell the person that's close to me that's affected by the car park fire. It will be the same information that I can share. The reason I've been asked by the Mayor to attend today, and he sincerely regrets not being able to attend today, genuinely. The reason I've been asked to attend today is I'm the chair of the Recovery Coordinating Group. So that is a multi-agency group of Liverpool City Council, the Fire Service, the Arena Convention Centre Group, the police, and other critical stakeholders in terms of determining how we not just look at the infrastructure, but actually how we look at you as individuals who have been affected by the fire, how we can respond to your needs and to your questions, and to work with you to facilitate a conclusion and closure, as Sue mentioned, as quickly as possible. Whilst I say as quickly as possible, I want to reiterate this may not be, and probably won't be, a quick process. So please understand that we are giving you as much information as we can. And for those of you who've seen the photos that we were able to share with you yesterday and have shared publicly, you will see the extent of the damage in the car park. And that is why it remains a challenge, and a significant challenge, in terms of taking things forward. So I am here to answer your questions, and I will do so to the best of my ability, but I will also be honest if I cannot answer your questions. So thank you.
That brings it back to me. Thank you all for coming today. It's been quite a long journey to get to this stage. A month ago, none of us knew each other existed, and we were all brought together by this event. What me and my team have been doing behind the scenes is to try and get you some of the answers to truly what happened. My full-time job is working as a fire safety expert and a security expert, both in a company I run and to government. And I went to a horse show to just see the new year in. I didn't expect to be involved in this. But this journey started actually New Year's Eve 2016, where we went to the horse show. I'm not an equine person, but my daughter and my wife are, and noticed some issues in the car park, so I started making notes, and I'll use an abbreviation, but my wife said, "Can you just not leave it, you know, it's New Year's Eve." So I said, "Okay, I won't," and did nothing more of it. We ended up at the car park purely, it was just a sequence of events that we were there so early. So on the night in question, that we decided we were going to have something to eat. So we got to the car park just after 4 o'clock that afternoon, went down to where outside the arena is, and my daughter had forgotten her mobile phone. So her and a friend went back up to level 3 where we'd parked, and came back down. And when Sue Wright posted that photo to the media, and I saw that row of cars, it was like, oh my God, my daughter was stood there not 10 minutes ago, where that fire started. So I, like you, am significantly financially affected by this. My car was 11 months old. The difference between what the insurers have paid and what I've paid is a staggering amount of money. But on the positive side, my daughter and a friend were fine. So I suppose if there's anything positive, you know, we are looking at an issue in terms of money rather than people. My daughter was aware of a group. Everybody knows me, but the lady sat to my right is the lady who actually set up this group. It was nothing to do with me, which has kind of brought us all together. And part of those discussions have been with the council. I put a list of questions that from the group and people have asked privately, because I sense the immense frustration of the response from the council side. So what might be a good idea is if we go through those questions and see whether we can make some progress on them. I mean, we turned up at the car park. Just show of hands, who's seen the drone footage?
Outside.
Yeah. We didn't get inside. We tried. So we wanted to kind of see, from an investigation point of view, what the state of the car park was, and to document things that may come up, because as Sue mentioned, this process can be years. So we wanted to document as good as we could what the building was like and how it stood. So I get this poor cameraman who is a drone expert. I don't know how to fly these things, and you have to have certain licenses with it being in a fly zone and things. So I managed to convince this guy to come and film it for us. But then the minute we show up at the site, we were pounced upon by the security guards of, not being too keen on allowing us to film it. But with some negotiation, and we got there. And then, as per usual, I opened my mouth and mentioned something on the group. And it's like, well, why are you asking these questions? We were concerned to release the drone footage in that it may upset people. That was our primary concern. It was a relatively expensive project to do. But I hope I got over 300 messages in the 24 hours after we released that footage of people saying thank you for closure. And then the dreaded question is, well, can we have footage from inside the car park? And that gave us a bit more of an issue in that whilst we were perfectly within our rights to film from the outside, we would need permission to film from the inside. We did ask, but that wasn't forthcoming, and without breaking the law, we we couldn't just send a drone in and start filming things. So I asked the council whether they would provide some photos instead, which came out yesterday. But I'm sensing that there's still a frustration in that it's not enough. The drone footage from the outside was quite good. It showed sort of all public areas. So the top question, remember we put a poll up of questions to send to the council on Facebook? That was sent, and that's by far, with 181 questions of why can we not have video footage from inside of the car park, especially now we know it exists. So I suppose the first question, with it being most to people's hearts, is why?
Okay, I will obviously answer that, and I will stand up so I can see people at the back as well. And also, I've been very remiss in not introducing the gentleman to my right-hand side, so apologies, Tris. Tris Brown is head of the Mayor's office, and he's here to ensure that we take back the issues that you've raised, because whilst I can make notes, I want to be able to focus on answering your questions. The drone footage, Merseyside Fire and Rescue and Liverpool City Council have commissioned drone footage, and it is ongoing. We cannot at this stage release it because it is part of the investigative process. And I know that's going to frustrate people, but it is part of the investigation. So we have to look at that, consider it, and at a point in time when it can be released, we will obviously seek to make it as available. But unfortunately, whatever we recover at this point, it is part of the investigation process and is therefore kept within that, because if it's released too soon and inappropriately, it could prejudice the investigation, and we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we have a full and detailed investigation appropriately. We will, as much as possible. We have shared the photos with you, and we have shared one video clip, certainly, with you to be able to show you some of the damage. There are other elements to it, but that, in short, is the simplistic answer, and I will take it back, and we will seek to share whatever we can with you as we go forward.
The next big one, and this was a real concern when we released the drone footage, is looking at the vehicles on the roof, that some of them seem perfectly intact and some on level 2 look the same from the outside. I mean, one of my big losses was possessions. It's surprising how much you actually leave in your car, especially at a horse show. I mean, as somebody who's completely outside the equine world, it seems any object that has the word equine in just add noughts to the cost. You know, it's like my daughter's horse has this big plasterer's bucket, and it's like, no, it's an equine one, so it's 4 times the price. It's like, it's a plastic bucket. But, you know, I had in there £5,000 in possessions. I had one of these, some other IT equipment that I uncovered for. But luckily, some of those vehicles do seem accessible in the sense that I know people have got these apps where they're still talking to their cars, and the iPads and things like that have got mobile phone SIMs in them, are still showing us working. So the next big question was possessions, as in what is the plan with the vehicles that are on the roof, which from the drone footage we can see immense damage to the floor. So it's not a simple case of just walking up to them, emptying the boot and taking it down the stairs. The firefighting stairwells are designed really to be a safe haven, but from the pictures that were released yesterday, and we'll talk about this a bit later on, it seems that even the safe havens are not safe. So I can understand entirely that going and retrieving possessions by putting somebody's life in danger first is not a great proposition, and the footage that you've got from drones doesn't involve having to walk anywhere other than the stairwells. But the one thing that's very close to people's hearts, like I got a very touching email regarding a child's teddy. So in terms of financial loss, the teddy's not. I mean, my daughter's 15 now, so I don't know how much teddies cost. But in terms of, you know, they're not particularly expensive. But to that child, to get that teddy back, and in this 3-page email, we weren't bothered about the car. It's like, my daughter wants a teddy because without it she won't sleep. So is there any kind of update on, realistically, is it going to be possible for access to the vehicles to retrieve them? Or is it going to be a case of the chance of, even if they are still there, the people aren't realistically going to be able to get them back?
Again, and actually, Tris has just reminded me about something which I think, apologies, I didn't make it clear. The drone footage that we've commissioned has actually only just started this week, so we literally have not even looked at that footage. So it's only started on Thursday and Friday of this week. So just to give you a sense of the timescales of how challenging this is. So it's not that we're keeping it, and we've not even literally looked at some of it yet. In terms of the response, and I know just from the queries that we've gotten that this is absolutely near and dear to people's heart, and Matthew's alluded to the challenges that are here and now, which is whilst your vehicle might be intact, either on the top level or even on one of the lower levels, it's the access to get to the vehicle that's actually quite dangerous. And because of the fact that the structure continues to move and to shift, we cannot risk people's lives to go in to get even possessions in the vehicles. And I completely understand the stories and the emotional loss. And it's not about things, it's about belongings and something that's close and dear to people's hearts. And I do understand that. So access even to a vehicle that is intact, it's about the process to get to the vehicle that is a dangerous scenario. And I think we're all grateful that no one was seriously injured or worse in the fire, and we don't want to have something happen as we try and go through this process. In terms of the realistic timescales, the timescales are going to be relatively lengthy about getting access to vehicles, even if they are intact, and we are awaiting the reports on how best to safely and effectively essentially manage the structure going forward, and that might include obviously the demolition process and how vehicles are dealt with as part of that process. We have not got those reports back yet, so I can't say what exactly will happen to the vehicles at this stage, how or when the vehicles will be retrieved, and if even at that point. This is all part of the reports that we're actually trying to get, and part of which the drone footage will be informing. Because what we have to look at is what the structure looks like. As you will have seen from the photographs, there are points in the floor where fuel has melted through. It's melted the floor and dropped onto a car below. And so it is a dangerous structure, and I cannot stress that enough. Again, we will seek to keep you informed, as informed as possible. It will probably not be. Actually, I'm not going to enter into speculation, because anything I say beyond that at this stage will be speculation in terms of the ifs, the mights, the probables, the possibles, because we just don't know. We are hoping to get those answers from the reports we are commissioning in terms of the structural survey and the definition and the demolition, and in terms of the future process of the structure reports and how that might happen. When we have that, that will be able to give us a process by which we can say, this is what will happen to these vehicles, including the ones that have been significantly damaged, because I know for some people, you might know that your vehicle was on level 3, but for some people they have requested to see their vehicle, even knowing it might be completely damaged, and I understand that. So we will have that, but I can't give you the answer at this stage, and it will be lengthy, because we are still awaiting those reports. When we get the reports, whilst we might not be able to share the details of the reports with you, we will certainly inform you and other affected people that the reports have now been made available to us, and we are in the next phases of saying how people might be able to access their belongings. But I stress again, it is not going to be an easy or a quick process. So I apologize for that, but please be aware, we are trying to do this as much as possible in terms of safety, as well as effectively to ensure that nobody else is harmed going forward.
I mean, a lot of these questions are really to do with information. As this helpline that was set up, just a quick show of hands, who's actually called the council helpline asking for questions? It's not too many. Carl, how did you find it?
Fobbed off. You ask questions to the council, having wrote to Mayor Anderson, and you just...
So just let me come across. So do you want to come up here so you can hear what you have? Because I haven't called, so I was keen for somebody who had.
Yeah, I've run this council hotline. I've given all the details in, and I've done it about 4 times because I was getting nothing back from the council. Constantly, I've done emails to Mayor Anderson. At one point, 4 emails were ignored until the last email I sent to Liverpool Echo to copy them into all the emails that I'd sent Mayor Anderson. Next minute, bang, email sent back. Wow. Now, why? Why do we have to get the media involved?
Didn't you go on Radio Merseyside?
I've not been on radio. No, I never went on Radio Merseyside.
There's another similar story where somebody struggled to get an answer, but then went to the Radio Merseyside on the phone in, and because presumably the email address mayor at it is dealt with by a team. They don't go straight to the mayor's inbox. Yeah, those would be a bit busy. It might be what is the process when somebody emails in the mayor's office? How those are read and kind of answered? And
I put the email into the mayor's office, into Radio Merseyside, and I also sent them because I knew Joe Anderson was going on to the Radio Merseyside, and there was again no answers. So I sent it into the question time because I was in hospital anyway that day, and I asked, get me some answers. And again, all of a sudden, I was starting getting replies. Again, as soon as the media's getting involved, answers are coming.
So, really an insight into how that process works, and who's manning the helpline, and kind of what briefings they have in terms of information.
Okay, there's 2 things, and I won't say your last name, but I do know your last name, Carl, and I'm aware of the circumstances of your case. So I am familiar with that, and obviously I heard your email as well on Radio Merseyside. So and in fact, actually, please talk to us afterwards. I'd appreciate that. In terms of, there's 2 elements. One is both the helpline, which is essentially effectively our contact centre, and also the database where we've asked people to register their details, of which we've had about 300, just over 350 people register for that to keep people informed. There's 2 things. The contact centre, that initial helpline, was because we knew there were outstanding queries and some of the stories and the issues that you've alluded to Matthew. So we wanted people to share those with us. So the contact centre will not, and that phone call in terms of that helpline, will not have the detailed answers for you. So, and they're there to gather the information, to pass on those requests. So as part of the database that we're gathering in terms of the issues that people are facing and how we can bring those together. So what we want you to do is please use the helpline because it helps us to gather information from everyone, but they won't be able to necessarily answer your detailed questions because there's, as I said, there's outstanding questions, and we will seek to answer it through that. For those who've registered for the database, sorry.
It's all right saying you pass the information on, but nobody gets back to you. You get a box standard email saying, your request has been, but no, we have not had one response.
Right, I think.
I called and let them know that Mayor Anderson's on the radio because I said, so when's the conference? Because he was making out that he'd set it up. And he said, oh, I rang on Monday. He said, when was he on the radio? So it was on Friday.
Right.
I'll be made aware what he said.
The contact centre will not necessarily know that detail, so so I apologise for that. Sorry. So there's 2 things. We have gone through everyone who's registered their details on the database. We went through and Tris and the mayor's team actually were part of that group. So those of you may have received information yesterday even as part of the Facebook group, but anyone who is registered on the database will have received exactly the same information. what we will do is absolutely take back the issue about the frequency of concerns. We are also seeking as much as possible to put information out on our website and via Liverpool Express as well. So again, all of the information is being made available. In terms of the response, Carl, I can only apologise that you feel you had to go to the media in order to get that response. I was aware of your case before you went to the media, and I know that some elements of the team in terms of some of the issues that you were raising were being dealt with, so I can only apologise that you felt you didn't get that response to you. And to those of you in the room who have registered on the database, I will ensure with Tris and the team that we will get that forward. In terms of the other part of the question, there is a process by which, if you email the mayor, that the team answers the emails and seeks to get back to you. Again, they will get back to you as quickly as possible, usually within a week, but it depends on the details of the issues. So we will take that back, and we will find out what happened in this circumstance that you felt you didn't get those answers. For those of you on the database, we do have your details, and we will ensure that we continue to communicate with you. And Tris and I will take it back, that we communicate with you more effectively than you feel we have.
So can we just clarify that point? At no point whatsoever did the mayor actually receive any email correspondence from any individual that's going through today?
Sorry.
Can you just repeat the question?
No. So you're.
At no point has the mayor actually or received any of the individual emails that have been sent from the room. They've all been gone through into a group of people who have been set up basically in call centres to field those calls.
There's two separate things here. One is registering your details onto the database. That is being gathered and collected. The mayor will not necessarily be aware of those 350 odd cases.
Exactly. So there's no
But
point
the
in
but
sending for information to the mayor, because fundamentally he's not going to do anything about it.
the emails to the mayor, he is aware of the content of those emails in terms of those individuals. But what I would ask is please register on the database, because that can ensure that we answer those questions to the whole group.
So at this stage, can we not turn around and say that it's not actually that we're going to be looking at your individual cases, we are basically fielding for information so that we can progress this at some point in the future?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, basically all we're doing at the moment is fielding for information. Every single person here is fighting, every person has had to fight for their own car, their possessions, their insurances, and the council, the information officer is saying is that fundamentally, just put a call centre up, people have been sending deep information, and the only time that that information is acted upon is when you feel that there's outside sources and the media are getting involved.
No, I think that's not quite accurate in terms of the information. No, in terms of the information that's been shared. So Joe has, for example, written to the ABI and continued to speak to the Association of British Insurers to seek to raise those issues. So we have gotten several calls into and also emails into the mayor's office. We have actioned those and taken those points forward. It does not require you to escalate it, and I apologise for people who feel they have needed to, but we have acted on that information and we are championing. The reason we have asked for people to share their information on the database is purely and simply so that we can communicate more effectively outwards to you, because we understand that there's a group here.
That is the crux of the question. If the information isn't actually going to the mayor's office, it's going to a group of people that have been set up to field that information and then source it to the relevant departments.
It is going to the mayor's office. Can I just be clear, because Tris literally is sitting next to me, who is the mayor's who is head of the mayor's office, and all of the information that has been shared either directly to the mayor's email or on the database is in the mayor's office, because Tris, who's sitting next to me, is one of the people who is sat around that team gathering that information to ensure that we are acting, and the mayor is acting on that information. So yes, it is going to the mayor's office.
The first email after I registered, which would have been the third or fourth day, I've never received an email out of you until you knew that this meeting was going to happen, and then we got these pictures through.
Right,
Why is that?
you should have had 2 this week.
No.
Right. We
I had one last night, one yesterday, and one last night, and the only information we've been getting is off Matthew. We can't get any information off anybody, and no one has actually corresponded to say, well, yeah, your vehicle, we'll look into that one.
Oh, okay, so you have, well, number one, you have gotten the emails, because the reason for setting, you've gotten two, so you have gotten. Okay. Sorry.
I mean, well, I'll just mention the whole bit. Now, there are Mr., Mrs., Ms. I must admit, if we'd have been asked, would the title "Hello Friend" be a good way to address an email? I think the last term that anybody who's on that list felt the mayor's relationship with them was as a friend. I mean, just looking at these questions, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's two issues. One in terms of communication, that really the message on has been pretty consistent of this is not a council issue, this is not a fire brigade issue, talk to your insurance company, they'll have all the answers. And the other issue is, like I said, the information is coming from the group that we set up, and that really that would be something that we would probably hoped had been done by official channels. Now, in a way, the settling of the damages is an insurance issue, but some of the statements the mayor has made have upset people in that I think it would be fair to say that most feel, for whatever various reasons, there's an issue in terms of trust. And like, for example, there was a tweet put out saying we weren't sure that whether the CCTV was intact from the building. But as Sue mentioned, lawyers and insurers, putting it bluntly, have been over us like a rash. The minute we started saying, well, there are issues to do with this fire, that there are problems. And this is not as simple as it was. I mean, I was there that night. Is Glenn in the room? Robinson? Oh, is that? Right. Sorry. This is the other side of the investigation team sat over here, who, that night of the fire, when we came out of the Pizza Express, there was a cordon already in place where some of the event stewards were there. And they said to me, oh, it's a contained car fire that we're dealing with on level 3. And I thought, great, there's 7 levels, I picked level 3. And I thought, right, okay, but it's contained. So I think within 5 minutes I'd sent a message to Glenn saying, what do you think of this? We've a contained car fire with, at that time, 6 pumps on site, the fire engine truck things. And your view on that, Glenn, was, politely, of it being a contained incident?
6 engines?
Yeah.
I said how big's the fire?
Contained car fire.
No, 6 engines.
And Mayor Anderson has been busy, sat on Twitter, saying he knows that there was no issues with the building and there was no issue in terms of fire safety. But that's where I think some of these trust issues have come from, because on one hand, he makes these bold statements that I don't think he's necessarily in full receipt of all the facts for. But there are certain things that we know aren't true. And one of the things we've been looking at over the past 3 weeks is mine and Glenn's specialist area is fire protection systems, fire suppression systems in buildings. And we have concerns. We've gone through tons and tons of footage that do raise concerns in how this was dealt with. As Sue mentioned earlier, there are potential litigants in the case, including the management company who were allegedly looking after the building. Well, if they were looking after the building, I wouldn't wish to trust them with anything that was too personal to me, because a contained car fire resulting in a £70 million loss, on their Facebook account, they're high-fiving themselves, thinking that they did such a fantastic job protecting us all. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't share that view. You know, I'm still quite upset of what happened. But one of the statements that they made was that they responded to an automatic fire alarm. So, like in here, there are smoke sensors on the ceilings that, in the event of a fire, will trigger an evacuation. We know that where the cars were, at least, there was no smoke detectors installed. We know that. And that raises questions. So in terms of trust, having this information come out which I don't necessarily say is to mislead, but like here, the third question was, where's the CCTV? And one of the tweets that was put out was that you weren't sure if the CCTV had survived. But yet insurers 2 days beforehand, who were acting for the building's insurance company, already confirmed that it had. Is this just miscommunication in that I mean, I don't know, I've never met Mayor Anderson in my life. Is he one of these characters that just likes to sit on Twitter, type, substance afterwards? Because you can see why to some people they feel that they're being lied to, which isn't necessarily the truth, that they are being lied to. But when he makes statements, and I don't know about, but a Q&A with the Mayor would actually be a quite nice thing for the group. Just show of hands, who would like to do this again but with the Mayor? So could have been easy to say who didn't. I get the impression he is a football fan. But if you could, because the next three questions are really about information and its validity and trust. And we appreciate the Mayor's office being here today, we really do. But you can see there's an awful lot of people who have trust issues. And personally, I mean, even if I don't think a personal visit in a forum like this for an hour would be, in the circumstance, the number of people affected. I mean, potentially, there's 1,350 vehicles. There could be 3,000 to 5,000 people affected by this who were there at the time. Would the Mayor be open to a situation such as this? And some points really about the issue about disclosure of things and some of these bold statements might be helpful.
Can I just ask a question? Could we not get the Mayor and the Chief Fire Officer of the National Fire Rescue Service in the room together? With the information conflict?
Yeah.
Because in one interview, Dan Collins said that sprinklers would have contained the fire and they would have done.
Well,
it would have reduced the temperature and helped contain it.
have you read, Mark, have you read this?
I haven't, no.
Right.
But Mayor Anderson then come out after Dan Collins' comment and said sprinklers definitely would have helped contain the fire.
Well, yeah.
Hold
on,
that
sorry.
statement of yesterday, the Mayor's office.
Which one?
The message from the Mayor that sprinklers were recommended that sprinklers are not fitted within car parks.
It's in the building regulations, it's not legislation, but what I would say is if you were to have Dan Collins here and Mayor Anderson, I think they said Fire and Rescue Service would have to concentrate the information coming out to Liverpool City Council.
Well, in fairness to the council, they did invite Merseyside Fire to be here today.
Did Fire and Rescue Service attend the recent council meeting, or did they leave?
Okay. One, let me answer the series of questions here. Number one, I will take back to Joe your request of having a Q&A with him. And that's all I can do at this point in time. I'm not going to say definitively yes, because that is obviously his decision. But I will take back and certainly feed back the concern that has been raised in this room. Two, Dan Stevens, who's the Chief Fire Officer for Merseyside Fire and Rescue, attended full council as in basically a public statement to support a motion, and his statement is on record regarding one of the motions that was put forward and voted upon at full council. So that's why he attended full council in that capacity. I can also relay the request to Dan as well of the request that came out today. The motion was with respect to the concerns of ongoing in terms of the cuts that have been made to the fire service over the past few years and the impact that has had in terms of their ability going forward. So you can read both the motion. I'm not going to try and repeat the motion verbatim, but please look on our website because you can see the motion, and the minutes will also reflect Dan Stevens' statement as well that he made at council. In terms of the tweets, and there's two things, and I was just going to ask Tris something, but in terms of a confirmation about the CCTV of whether we had sent something out publicly But what I can say is when the tweet was issued, we were not certain that the CCTV footage could be retrieved effectively. So whilst it was, we had the possibility, and this might be where the confusion has come from, the insurers saying, we know it's been recovered, the physical structures had been recovered of the servers that contained the footage, but at the point that the tweet was made, we had yet to determine whether or not the footage could actually be recovered because the servers had been smoke damaged and water damaged. So please keep in mind that context, that this is an ongoing issue. We have since been able to retrieve footage from the CCTV servers, having had experts look at that and retrieve it, etc. That CCTV footage in its entirety is informing and being used to inform the ongoing investigation. What we have done and what we are trying to do is to work cooperatively with the insurance companies to allow them to see segments of that footage to verify the presence of vehicles of entering into and out of the building, and as an example. But there are a number of cameras and there's a number of CCTV elements of footage that need to be reviewed, and that is an ongoing process. And again, because it is part of the investigation and there are details on it that are effectively classed as personal information, that cannot be shared more broadly at this time. So there is CCTV footage. The tweet, when it was sent out, of we don't know if we have it, is because of that point in time, is we didn't know if we were able to recover it. What I can tell you is we have recovered it and we are looking at it, and we are seeking to make it available to insurance companies at their request, because they do have to request it formally to us as part of their contractual relationship with you. And we will enable them to view the relevant footage in terms of a vehicle identification, for example, from Monday.
Do you accept anything Johansson says as far? For example, he said that the vehicle had fuel conversion. Is there any evidence that it has? Is that linked in with the DVLA or any vehicle records? We know the truth.
I'm not going to comment on that because it is part of the ongoing investigation. So I'm not going to begin to comment on it.
Well, these comments, so I feel that he should be brought to task on just randomly making comments and tweets that are indicators to everybody here that there are things that are happening that aren't happening. Should he just keep quiet?
Yes, I think I think unless there's any concrete evidence, probably concrete is the wrong word, but it's not that good, isn't concrete? But it isn't particularly helpful to make, especially when they come under scrutiny, because as well as the investigation team that I'm heading, there are people such as Mark who work in the same sector I do and scrutinise things that are said. It is a shame Merseyside Fire Service aren't here today. I really wish they would have come. But they have issued, everybody got this on the table? Where the earliest things of the statement is Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service received the first call to this incident at 16:42, which does tally with kind of witness statements and everything else we've got. The initial reports were to a car well alight on level 3 of the car park. There's some contradiction in that from some of the witness statements of the view of most people, and Sue can maybe speak more than me as she took the photo, that in the early stages of this, it wasn't a particularly serious fire, that the single vehicle car fire that wasn't particularly well ablaze. I think the picture you took looks a bit probably worse than it was, with it just being an iPhone. That two fire engines were mobilised at 16:43, which for this type of incident would make sense. and arrived on scene at 16:50, which again tallies. The first crews were committed to the third floor car park wearing breathing apparatus, which again would tally with the response to this type of incident. Initial crews reported multiple vehicles, 10 to 12, involved in running fuel fires. So what they're saying there is by that time, so very early on in the incident, that they'd had issues in terms of fuel leaking, which there's a number of tests that are actually in the public domain where car parks have had simulator fires like this, where ruptures to fuel tanks didn't occur for hours. Yeah. So, in the statement, they're kind of suggesting that within 15, 20 minutes that we've got fuel tanks ruptured, which there's some of the questions we'd like to ask. A request was made for a further 10 fire engines and 3 combined ladders to be sent to the scene. It doesn't say specifically what time they decided to do that, but just in context, to get that kind of response from any fire service is a major incident. By the time they made those requests, they were of the opinion that they were in a place that they didn't know what to do, that it had gone to such a serious incident. And I think that is one of the questions that, certainly from my side, that we want to look at is how the fire service dealt with it. Because these types of fires don't result in this kind of loss. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Mark?
The initial thing is, have got a sprinkler system. Fuel rates are up 930 degrees Fahrenheit. Right? Modern day car load, because a lot of the external bodies of the car will be plastic and material, which means that through radiation and conductance, the heat will cause the fire to spread.
Can everybody hear him, Mod? Do you want to come up here? Can everybody hear what he's saying? No, right, come up here.
If there was a sprinkler system.
Come to us.
Alright, I probably should introduce myself. My name is Mark Connor. Similar to Matthew in the fire and security industry, I specialise in fire risk and assessment. I parked on the 6th floor of the car park, which when the fire started on the 5th floor should have made it pretty safe. There's an organisation called the BRE who do fire testing, which, like Matthew and his colleague would have said, 90 minutes for a fuel fire to spread is pretty about right. Looking at the first images of the fire on the bonnet of the car, should have been easily contained. So the statements from Mayor Anderson about it being a fuel converted vehicle and things may be significant in terms of, right, if it was a poorly done job, it could have caused the fuel to engage in fire, but there's no evidence that it was a converted vehicle, and that's something that needs confirmed with BVLA, but there's been no evidence published that it was. The Fire and Rescue Service haven't come out and said it was, which suggested it wasn't. When you look at the fire itself, you would go, fuel burns at 930 degrees Fahrenheit, you can imagine the temperature. When you look at vehicle tests in the past, car bodies were metal, so the conductance of heat between vehicles would mean the spread of fire would less. So when you look at fire risk assessment, you look at fire loading and the material. So with car bodies now changed and plastic parts and things, it's not unreasonable to think the fire would spread through heat, conductance and through transference because the ceiling's quite low. If there was a sprinkler system in there, it would have reduced the temperature. So yeah, you would say you don't put water on fuel fires, but it would have kept the temperature down. And if you listen to Dan's comments after the fire, he said if there was a sprinkler system, it would have helped contain the fire so that they had the chance to fight it. By the time the Fire and Rescue Service come, realised the impact of the fire and had the chance to put anything in place, put pumps in the river and things, it was too late. They were never going to contain it. They were always going to try and limit damage and stop the spread to neighbouring buildings, which I think they've done a good job on. Mayor Anderson talks about centralised government cuts. They could have sent 70 appliances there that night. It wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference whatsoever. It's just political gain. He focuses on legislation, says, it wasn't a building requirement, it wasn't in the approved document for building regulations. He's quite right. But as far as risk assessments go, that doesn't mean you don't fit it. There's no building regulation that says it should fit CCTV or signage, for example, for various things. But they chose to because they seen it was a risk. So when you look at the severity of a fire in there, it happens. Automatic fire detection, again, there should have been, there should be heat detection. If you look at most privately owned car parks now, they all have heat detection or heat trace cable. The majority of them are sprinkled, so it's a choice. And in fairness to Mayor Anderson, and again, I believe the car park was a Lib Dem car park, it was the previous.
It was built 10 years ago.
Yeah, so for me, his response should have been, he should have come out and gone, it's a great loss. Yeah, I believe the building met the scope of the building regulations. Could we have done more in terms of risk assessments? Should we have been reviewing the fire risk with it? Things like Glenfell and other recent major fires posed he should ask these questions on a regular basis, and he chose not to. For me, he's very defensive in his approach, and I don't think he's helpful with his facts, and that's why I touched on why is he not here today. His birthday party last night. I'm sure you attended.
Thank you.
I think there's two things which are coming out from the group here. One is the perceived lack of communication from the council. I think we can take that message away today, and we can, as a group, work out how we can make that better for all of us. And whether that's on a weekly update with a meeting, the council can come here, anyone can come to the meeting, have a meeting, an update meeting, we can feed it back to the rest of the group. We can easily resolve that issue. Let's draw a line in the sand and let's move on constructively. And there are answers, there are questions to be answered. And the second issue in relation to the fire, and this has taxed me quite a bit, is about 10 days ago there was a fire in Bolton, multi-storey. A single fire, a single car vehicle, 3rd floor, I mean you couldn't write it. Multiple cars surrounding it, and that was successfully extinguished and made safe. Now for me as a layperson, you guys are all the experts in the fire industry, for me as a layperson it just asks one simple question. Why can a single car fire on a 3rd floor in a multi-storey be extinguished in Bolton and not in Liverpool? That's the question.
I don't know if people are aware, every time there's a fire, there is a report written that can be obtained for you to scrutinise what's being done. I have asked Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue for a copy of that report, but with the fire being relatively recently, we may not have that for a few weeks. But that is a question we want to know. How can the Manchester fire was, to a degree, a non-incident, and the Liverpool one be so different? I think that is a question that most people sat here want to know. From a legal and claim point of view, it's outside the scope of that because the loss has now happened. But part of the continuing work that, like myself, Glenn, Mark do, is there is, I think, an understanding of most people sat in the room that the buildings that you're going to should comply with health and safety regulations and that you're well protected from fire. That sadly isn't the case. Not wishing to make it political, but the government has decided that regulation of fire safety is not important. So any of you sat in this room here could claim that you are experts in this arena and you can install fire systems in buildings like this with absolutely no qualifications or regulation at all. Just a show of hands, how many people were aware of that you didn't actually need any qualifications or competence to deal with fire safety matters? Right, that's it. And that's part of the problem. The government's view on it was that really deaths through fires have fallen over the past couple of decades, which is true. But it's not a great situation where people who aren't trained and competent are actually dealing with all our lives. I mean, I travel an awful lot with my work, and staying in hotels sometimes made me very paranoid seeing some of the things that you do. I mean, when I asked for all the pictures to be sent in, so somebody emailed a picture saying, look, it's just a picture of my car, what are you going to see from it? But actually some of the infrastructure to do with the cabling of the fire detection system didn't meet requirements. So even though the picture looked quite, really nothing to show, it actually showed us a lot, because then it asked the question, well, if that bit's wrong, what other bits are wrong? in fairness, defence to ACC, they usually put out tenders to contractors like companies like us, saying that we need a fire alarm that meets these requirements. And it could be that, as far as the council were concerned, that it did meet requirements, although how on maintenance visits these issues haven't been done. Or it could be a case that they were brought up and the council didn't act on them. We just don't know yet. We have asked for disclosure of these records so that we can actually share with you really why was it in the state that it's in now. But this will take a long time. And one of the frustrations that, in fact, Mark, you should be up here, you do a good job there, is that we have no power in terms of the industry we work in. Because of no regulation, we don't have any power. But with this fire, people... Huh?
There's a couple of things there. One is, and this is where John Anderson could use his position well. What he could do is he could campaign for the change in the building regulations. He could campaign for the RRO, which is the fire safety regulation before order, to be changed, which removed the need for the fire and rescue service to issue fire certificates for buildings, which was a step backwards for the fire safety.
Really not true for that. Really not.
Yeah, what used to happen is that the fire brigade used to inspect buildings themselves in terms of fire safety compliance. Back in 2005, the law changed in that now relies entirely on the owners of the premises to get people like myself, Glenn, Mark, to carry out risk assessments for them. There's nobody policing it. So you could be in a situation where people aren't complying with safety regulations and it only comes to light when there's a fire. I do agree, it was a step backwards.
Yeah, and the third thing was, there's an organisation in this country called Brough, which regulates the fire industry. The problem is it's not legislatively required to use a Brough organisation, which is a third-party certification school. If it does, then what happens? People are doing fire risk assessments, people who are doing the maintenance, the installation of firefighting, life safety systems, will be approved and will be inspected. And like you touched upon, you know, the fire rate with fixings for cables in that building should have prevented the cables from falling.
They were held up by plastic tie wraps.
The physical fire protection of the building should stop the spread. And this is the problem, because it's not legislatively required, then it doesn't happen because it's a cost-saving exercise. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the contractors with us at the council use full fire risk assessments, life safety maintenance. I can guarantee that they're not all paying for everything.
Just for people outside the industry, what we have is a halfway house in that companies that you work for might have certifications like ISO 9000 and the environmental standards, those kind of things. So companies like ours who want, and this is completely voluntary, to put ourselves under independent scrutiny where inspectors come and audit the work that we're doing, check the technical competence of our engineering teams, those companies exist. But they're not mandatory. So the business I run does have independent scrutiny, but equally, without it, there's nothing to stop us to trade. So the problem is you tend to get the companies that want to do it properly go for accreditation because they want some form of recognition that actually they're not cowboys. Whereas but one thing that is sometimes very frustrating is the standards to do with fire safety look like the Yellow Pages, the very, very in-depth, strict standards. However, there is currently nothing to stop people not complying with them until they face an investigation like this, and then the question is, why didn't you do things properly? They aren't regulators. I mean, in Ireland, I actually work for the regulator in the security sector, where on behalf of the government and the regulator there, I go and audit these certification bodies to make sure that they are making sure that people who do this type of work are up to the mark. Here, unless you want to be a bouncer or carry cash around or watch CCTV, there is no other regulation in the sector, and that is a big problem. Sure.
Just looking on something, can you clarify that the fire brigade don't inspect, is it private residents or commercial residents?
They do, but it's usually large premises or what's acting upon somebody puts a complaint in or they see something wrong.
Do we get them? I get them about every 12 months.
Yeah, but what used to happen was when you commission a new building, it required a high certificate from the fire authority. That no longer happens now, so I don't
it's voluntary.
Before, so if we was looking at car park, for example, if you listen to that, some person says the sprinklers were about. Now, if it was required from a fire certificate, when that car park was commissioned and handled, that has to be under control. The fire rescue service would have no duty to say, we can't pass it, we can't shoot fire.
The regs changed on in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that changed, yeah. So that's one way.
And if the regs change, have you then got to specify that building to the new regs? Or can you go with grandfather rights and keep it the way it was?
It all comes down to the person who owns what the traffic building, because it says it's your land, it's all about, it's no requirement. Well, while it's not legislatively required, that's choosing it here. Now, what I would say is look at those who drive their own car, or those who drive to the beach, because that's a private asset. Also include your automatic fire protection, it's fine.
We have touched on a subject here that consumes our lives in many ways. And unfortunately, until Grenfell happened, nobody was listening. Government didn't want to know. The good guys did the good work and everybody else got on what they're doing. I'm hoping that now, because there's been 2 serious fires, that government are listening, that it's time that this was regulated. And we learned through some of the mistakes of the past that it's time that safety over budgets is actually important. And talking of insurers, this is the last question on the thing. To some degree, I have a letter here from the ABI and are in dialogue with them separately. They're under the impression that really we should be grateful in that their members have waived our excess, put the no claims bonus back. But just a show of hands, anybody who's renewed their insurance since the fire and have been absolutely caned in renewals? Yeah. AXA are one of the ones that they're refusing to give it back. Now, another show of hands is a request that I think we should be making to the ABI, especially with the Council's help, is not only have we financially lost on the car, what about our content? And that really, for me, the loss for my vehicle to do with the insurance side was a couple of £1,000. My contents were £5,000. I think we should be making some representation in that they're not contractually obliged to do so. That this is the problem. But I think a polite request from Mayor Anderson, as he was very keen to ask them in the early days to waiver all the excesses. I'll be kind here and say he got a result. Can he do it again for us?
Okay, a couple of things here. Yes, Joe can certainly write to the ABI, which is our mechanism of communicating to all insurers to encourage a consistent approach, because we are aware there are differences, and you've just identified one of the organisations that has a different approach. And picking up your issues about the contents, the insurance gap, if you like, between the value of the vehicle and compared to what you've been offered. Absolutely, the Mayor can write on your behalf to lobby the ABI and to really press that point home for the insurers. We've actually been in contact with Joe, and Joe has agreed to come to a Q&A with you, so he has confirmed that. And just on that point as well, and I know what people were saying about his tweets, I think whilst people might feel frustrated about them, they are coming from a point of wanting to give people information as quickly as possible. And taking on board what you're saying about the points of the accuracy and maybe the confusion they're causing, we will take that back and we will work with Joe in terms of how we get information out to you quickly. And also, just talking to Sue, the communication is obviously a factor, and we will absolutely talk to Sue and Matthew on the group on how we can keep you updated on a much more frequent basis. And that might be saying, actually, we don't have anything new to tell you, but we will at least be able to tell you that. And so we will keep that. But I think it's what I would say is when Joe is tweeting information, it is trying to keep people informed in that way as much as possible, and it is always coming from that place. As I said at the beginning, full disclosure, and I will answer questions I can answer as much as possible. So picking up your question, yes, it was Joe's birthday party last night because he has celebrated a significant birthday this week, and yes, I attended. So, but that is not the reason why he's not here today. Go on. We relayed the request to the fire service, and as part of the request... No, the reason the fire service... There was a detailed conversation, but in summary, it's what they didn't want to do is prejudice the ongoing investigation at this stage. But I will relay the request in terms of to the fire service and relay it to Dan of the questions. But I think I'm not going to go beyond. Well, it's basically there's an ongoing investigation. I'm not even going to forgive me because I actually might have misused the word in that sense. But there is an ongoing investigation. I will relay the request to Dan on behalf of the group.
Well, one of the key topics that the investigation is looking at, because it's already established what caused the fire, so what else do you investigate?
Well, to be honest with you, it's the same questions that you have, that we have. So I'm not going to get into detail of the questions of the specifics. It is an ongoing investigation. It is live. It is looking at a number of issues, not least of which is what caused the fire, how did it spread, how did the building react. All of those things are under question. And that's why we can't give you the answers, because we are investigating them as we speak. So but I'm not going into the detail, because actually, it's not my investigation, it's the fire service's investigation. So I can't even give you that specific detail.
Can I ask a question about communication, please? Regarding, you say Joe's tweeting. I'm not on social media.
Right.
I haven't realised Liverpool City Council had a page. Can you put it on the web page? Could you put the web page address on this handout?
Yes.
I want to keep in touch, I want to register, but there are normal channels for Liverpool City Council to use rather than tweeting.
No, absolutely, and we actually have, and I think the hyperlink is still, the link is still live on Liverpool City Council's website. If you go to www.liverpool.gov.uk, on that very front page, there is a banner which is anyone who is affected by the car park fire, please click here, and it goes into that information. And we will be sending...
You know, what date are we in January now? How long would you like to send a letter out to everybody involved that there is this page? Like, how many people are here and how many people are
can I just say, we needed to get the database information to send some of that out. So do you want to...
Yeah. Because I've got a question just as well about it. So, on the front page of Liverpool City Council's website is a link to a form which you can fill in to give us your details. We would like as many people as possible to fill that in, if you haven't already. And that gives us your information to put it in a database so that we can send you emails. Now, we obviously can't send emails to people telling them about it if we don't have their emails in the first place.
We've got our car registration numbers, so there's people that came to the whole show from London, from Scotland, all over, hire cars. Why can the registration numbers of the vehicles not be taken? And the people have had a letter to let them know that this is going on.
Can I just say, we actually don't have that list of information, because in terms of all of...
How do the insurers know that our cars are in there?
Because you have reported it to your insurers, potentially.
They're not even asking us for proof that our car is in there. They're just confirming. So they must have a list
Right.
of all the cars that were in there.
Well, they don't, and it's certainly not come from us, because we don't have that
Why
list.
they take out of my car and I've got proof that my car was in there. And who's been paid out? I've got proof that the car was in there. How do we know?
Right.
There's only 1,340 cars in there, right? There's 5,000 claims coming.
Right. Can I just... No, I can't... Well, sorry, folks, here. Can I just say, I can't answer questions in terms of why one insurer has paid out under different circumstances, or several have paid out. I mean, that is a matter with that. What I can say, as chair of the Recovery Coordinating Group, is at no point in time have I or any member of the group said, we have a full list of vehicles, and to therefore, in terms of picking up your point of writing to the vehicle owners, I don't have that list.
I actually could answer the question as to why insurers have paid out, because I asked the source vehicle insurers the same question. And the answer is this, is that they've paid out on trust. And if you then are to be found out that you have made a false claim, which will be very easily provable, then you will be prosecuted for insurance fraud. And that's it. That's the top and bottom of it. They have reacted to a situation and they have paid out. They have not waited for proof on it. And to give them credit, that's actually quite a good position. Some insurers have reacted quicker than others. We've all got some complaints, but that is the answer. They reacted to a situation, they've paid out, and if it finds out at some point that somebody's put in a fictitious claim, then they will be prosecuted.
I think what I would say is we've made the efforts to text Joe. Joe knows that the meeting is going on, so he will have kept his phone available.
Why did he feel that it wasn't important for him to not be here today? That's my biggest, he just felt that it just wasn't important for him not to be present today.
The meeting he's gone to, is that more important than this one?
I'm sorry, I'm not going to get into that kind of speculation. Sorry, Matthew.
Just one sec. That doesn't include because I agree with you. But
He's saying that he wants to another meeting, but we all have lives, we all work, and at the end of the day, we're going to have to give up more of our time to come and sit in another meeting just to suit him. And I just feel quite cross about that.
That's true. I mean, to put on this event has cost a fair amount of money to do. We've representatives from various television organisations and radio here. They've all had to give up time, send their crews. So yeah, there's a big cost to do an event. That is true. But in fairness to the team that are here, that's a question that we need to put to Mayor Anderson, and I think it should be the first one. To be honest, it's not I'm defending him, but this lady can't answer for him. But I think it's a question. Glenn, have you contacted the Mayor's office, or was it ACC where you're getting a cold shoulder on stuff? Did you get a response to the tweet? Have you been blocked yet? for stalking. Sorry. The council's website, yeah. Yeah. So is that something to take a look at and just make? Yeah. Because I presume the process is once they're registered on there, they're on the email list and the updates that are going out. In terms of the contact I had with the ABI, it mirrors exactly what Sue said, that they haven't had verification that any vehicles were there, that they're literally taking this on trust. Now, I suspect that the media coverage has had a lot to do with how the insurers have decided to deal with this. And I know in certain corners, having this event on national television and radio has come to some criticism. But if we weren't having the media's attention, we've representatives here from BBC, Sky and ITV today, that without their involvement, just a quick show of hands, how seriously do you think we'd be being taken by this? So I think it's a necessary evil. It's a lot harder to ignore if you have a loud voice, and the media give us a loud voice. Now, we'll have to ask Mayor Anderson separately. Don't cause him more controversy by any more tweets today, but hopefully representatives from the television and radio companies will be invited to that meeting too. Yeah, I'd like that. So there's a question that over here that I put down. Who was it? Yeah? Yeah.
If it wasn't a fire and it was something else that had happened that was worse, i.e. terror, because that's what we thought it was, to begin with, we were told it was a very small fire, we got outside and it was big and scary, that could have forced everybody into Liverpool and something happened that we could tell. It wasn't fantastic. There was no plan in place anywhere around to deal with the situation. I've got a 7-year-old daughter, I'm a bereaved parent, she was absolutely petrified. We were parading around Liverpool, trying to find somewhere to go that was dry and warm, right? That was, quite a few people had gone by that point because people were filtering out of the building. Now, if everybody had to evacuate all at the same time, i.e. if there was terror, threats, potential, anything, what is the plan for the Echo Arena? Do they have one?
I'll answer the first bit.
There wasn't anything. Yes, there was loads of police outside. Yes, there was the fire services. We were told which exit to go out of. Yeah, that was it.
Well,
That was it.
well, in terms of
Go towards the waterfront.
in terms of exits, we had a number of witnesses concerned that they couldn't get out of fire doors because they were locked. Is any of those people here? Would one of you like to come up and talk through? Oh, we have. Yes. So,
People should make their way safely through to the main doors where they'd be escorted out safely. Everybody got to the main doors and secured the Echo Arena. And we got to the main doors, to the concourse, and the doors were locked by security. We said, we've been informed, we need to get out. No, we've been told that unfortunately we can't let you out. The doors were locked, people were getting anxious, babies were crying, people with wheelchairs were trying to push through. It was chaos, absolute chaos. And do you know what? How it didn't turn into a disaster, then I do not know. That's my point. What had happened is there was an emergency and say the staff in the Echo Arena they had no training whatsoever. They didn't know. Well, I don't know, I'm from Manchester, but at the end of the day, people did not know how to get people out of that building safely. No. No, and when you ask people stuff in there, which was the best way to evacuate and to get away from the fire, people, they just said, well, I don't know, we only do it.
So critically, these eyewitness accounts, if you've put them on a statement and you've sent them to MPG, you need to send them back to Matthew because we need them in a centralised point because this information is so important. I've heard eyewitness accounts of people in the Echo Arena that had smoke on their face. Has anyone here had that? So the exit... So this lady's saying that she was evacuated from the car park, she ran into the Echo Arena, and then the smoke was then filling into the Echo Arena. So these are issues which I've raised in my statement when I've been interviewed by various people. These are the eyewitness accounts that I've been told about. But they need looking into for future events and future safety and what can be learned. The horses, when I went in to evacuate the horses were going out through a tunnel which goes underneath from the car park through to the Echo Arena. I understand that those doors were never shut. So the fire doors, if it's right that the fire doors were never shut, if the fire had cascaded into level 1, that would have then gone straight through. You guys know better than me, but I assume would have gone straight through and then into the Echo Arena. So And the horses were going into, correct? Exactly. So all these issues. There is also. So these are all critically important statements which need to be written down as quickly as possible and sent to Matthew in a centralised point. One of the eyewitness accounts that I saw on Facebook, I don't know if the person's here today, was that they evacuated down one of the stairwells on the city side, and when they got to the bottom they couldn't open the fire escape. And the fire escape was only activated to be opened after they'd smashed the glass.
We got in the lift and the fire alarm hadn't got on. The lift door shut, and as the lift door shut, the fire alarm went off. The lift doors did open.
Okay.
And then we had to go down 5 flights.
So
We can't say the lifts were working.
well, there were disabled people getting help to be carried down. I know, I saw that. One of the things which I've given evidence about is that the disengagement and lack of coordination of the staff, and this is something which the council, will need to look at as well as Merseyside Fire Brigade, because what I witnessed was a lack of coordinated response. And I also heard, as you've seen my interview, I asked about 2 or 3 fire brigade officers what the plan was to get the horses out. And then I decided to ignore them and just go and do it. But I heard a security, I don't know if he was security or his event staff, or he had a luminous jacket on, he was stood by the barriers, and I heard him say in the middle of this chaos, "I'm going home in a minute, it's New Year's Eve." Now I will be able to recognise him, and I will... It does.
What is the plan that's in place if anything happens in these buildings?
So you're absolutely right, and I'm not here to defend anybody. I'm not. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm not here to defend anybody. Yeah, they did. They did set up a crisis centre. Yeah. We as a hotel tried to accommodate people, but there was a lack of coordination of information. But then in the early hours, I think you'd already set up a coordinated attempt.
Okay. Right.
When I locked the car and was walking out, like after we got out of the lift, the fire alarm was going off. So I must have drove in, either when it started, driven past it, but next time I'm on half an hour by.
Okay.
Did you not see on the CCTV?
I do know, because I spoke to Merseyside Fire Brigade about this now specifically, on my 999 call at 16:44, were the smoke alarms going off in the background, and the answer is no, which I thought as much. So I was on the scene of a fire, I'm ringing 999, there was no smoke alarms going off. So the sirens weren't going off at that point.
They only went off until we entered the lift.
Okay. Can I just say, I mean, obviously I'm not going to respond because these are your accounts, and actually they're really helpful for me, because what I can do is go back and ask exactly those questions. To just confirm a couple of points, the Pullman Hotel did offer, people did go into the Pullman Hotel as well. In terms of the point, I will find out what happened and why you weren't given instructions, but there was exactly, but there was a rest centre which was activated, and people did go to it, which was on Park Road. So when when we received the call, it was set up and set up, but I appreciate that. And it's all of these things that we need to take back and find out what happened. So absolutely.
Well,
sorry, can I just say there are plans in place, and what I will do is take back of why those plans were not executed in the way that we feel they should be.
It doesn't need to be a terrorist establishment to follow it. It should have been followed.
Well, in answer to your first question, if this had been a terrorist incident, which was ruled out quite quickly from both sides, but if that had been the case, or the timing had been different where more people in that car park, the answer to your question would be deaths. The timing it happened, if it had to happen, was the best. Oh, sorry. I'm being told off. How many people saw the picture of the fireman with the dogs giving paws and stuff? How many people saw the thing saying dogs died? Because that seemed to have been... Yeah. So Sue's quite right that there were 2 deaths of dogs, which somebody who has a dog, you know, it's quite a heart-wrenching thing to think they were left in there.
Can I just interrupt you there for a second? When we packed up at 4:08, and as we was walking past, we actually witnessed a car with a dog in, and as we got down to the main where you actually exit the building, there was a lady sat on a chair with a high vis on, and we reported it to her, and we said, you know, it wasn't acceptable that. She said, we've had a number of complaints about that. She said, it's been there since 10 o'clock this morning. How despicable is that?
PCA was informed and never turned up.
But surely the staff should have had the power to do something. If that had happened at 10 o'clock, if they had reports at 10 o'clock that morning of dogs in a car, they shouldn't have left it till gone 4 o'clock.
I completely agree with you. The issue is, sadly, the frontline staff that are deployed at these events and are dealing with serious matters such as this and fire safety aren't that great. You can have all... I mean, there are, in terms of fire risk assessment, fire alarms, all this kind of stuff, there are plans. The problem is the plans are usually drawn up with people like us, but we aren't the ones actually on the front line that end up deploying them. There is serious questions about how the stewards, security, whatever you call them, dealt with it. And as a wider picture outside the investigation for this fire, there is a wider knock-on effect of how we protect what goes forward in terms of the next Echo Arena fire, so that people aren't ending up sat like we are here asking these questions. It is a sad state of affairs, that's true. But in terms of confidence of the people who were there at that night, it was an all-time low. Did anybody, just for balance, did anybody think that the way it was dealt with by this staff was good? No, as in the event staff and the... No.
It's a distinct lack of information. That's what the problem was. There's nothing coming forward to us. We were shutting it down in the restaurant.
Yeah.
These were there with one exit.
But as a percentage, there's what, 150 people here? That's one.
We were evacuated outside, and everybody's wet, and we told you can't go that way, you can't go that way, you can't go that way, and I was scared.
These are...
I mean, there are plans in place for all significant buildings, and the ACC and the Echo Arena and are one of them, so there are plans in place. What we do is, as agencies, every single time anything happens like this, be it significant major incident like this, or something even more minor, is we constantly review what happened, why things did or didn't happen the way they should have. So picking up the point about the lack of communication, the information of the frontline staff, those questions will absolutely be asked. There is an each agency and each organisation that's been involved is asking those questions of themselves, and we will be sharing that in a multi-agency environment shortly, actually. In 2 weeks' time, we are bringing together to actually ask exactly those questions. So in terms of what happened, what worked, but what didn't work as well, and actually what happened on the day. So those questions, those answers will be in place. There are plans in place, but obviously, based on what you've said today, some of the execution of those plans was not as we would want them to be, and we will be asking those questions as to what happened on the day. So absolutely, and we will come back to you with the answers where we can get them. Well, initial response would be from the fire service, and then...
They didn't know initially what the incident was. They knew it was a fire, but they didn't know the cause of the fire was. So I was just interested to find out who coordinated the incident, whether it was the police that took command or the fire brigade, because had it been the fire brigade, their initial response would be to evacuate that specific area. Had it been the police that took command, they would have looked more in depth to evacuate the city in general.
What I will say, and I'm not going to get into the exact order, because these are the things that we're checking in terms of the timeline of things that happen. What I will say is regardless of which service responds in the first instance, so the fire service responded because it was a fire response, a fire report. However, whenever there's an emergency incident, multi-agency principles kick into place, and I won't go into the details of those, but whatever happened, and I do know this on the ground, is there was a multi-agency, so police, fire service and ACC meetings there on the ground coordinating the response. So regardless of the first responder, that joined up response would have happened, but what I can't give you is the detail of exactly what happened when.
So, one last question, because we're way over time.
Fire experts. Now, surely a code with some description should be put in place by, say, 6 or 7 o'clock. Should be well in place. What kind of distance should that be?
Sorry, I just have a bit louder.
Code should have been put in place by 6 or 7 o'clock. Yet I was able to walk up to, and there were still people in the hotel within spitting distance of that hotel. That was a fire.
Yeah, the code was a week early on.
And the people who went to get the rain were just lounging about. There was no call. Anybody could walk up. If it's a multi-agency thing, surely you should have some sort of control, some sort of confirmation of what's going on, and some sort of code to stop people getting too close. I'm guessing that there was also many things in the air because of the nature.
The cordon I was at was being controlled by the police, but the other cordons, they had some event staff try and reasonably, to put it nicely. Yes, I must admit, one of the event staff grabbed my daughter and pushed her over the bridge. Now, I wasn't there. Maybe it was a good idea that I wasn't, but bearing in mind that these people are victims of a fire, and in effect that the security staff are pushing them around and tackling them as if they're criminals, that isn't an acceptable response. If they were SIA licensed guards, which I saw no signs of any, you've seen them if door staff that have a little blue badge on them. I don't know what training those people had or what they were there at, but yeah, roughly tackling people and in effect assaulting people wasn't a great customer service response, despite the fact they had the words customer assistance tattooed on their back. That's just personal stuff. So what I think has come from this is there's a lot more to know. There's now 2 sides of where we go forward. One is in terms of a legal case, prospectively for the money we've lost. The bigger side from what I'm doing is all these questions you've got in terms of how was the response, and ultimately what went wrong and who. I think the answer will be there is no one person who got it wrong. I think the lack of joined up thinking that night means that there was a lot wrong. But in terms of the steering group that Sue mentioned earlier, Sue is a very experienced barrister. Just a show of hands, are people happy with Sue to kind of help us in terms of reviewing the offers from the legal firm and scrutinizing that? Because I'm not a lawyer, I'm a fire safety expert. We have within our group, who is also one of the victims, somebody who is an expert in law. So just a quick show of hands, are we happy for Sue to... And from the fire safety side, myself and the team, some that are here, some that you've not yet got a chance to meet. No, fine. I mean, I'm quite happy to carry on with the weekly videos. In fairness to the Mayor's office, you know, we've had that many conversations over the past week. It's been intense. That if you're happy to continue, I don't mind keeping up that pressure so that. Plus, it's also easier if I'm collating sort of the questions and channeling them rather than having 300 questions asking the same thing. It does take away some of the pressure, which hopefully means that you've got more time to actually give us the answers we want. The Q&A with Mayor Anderson, I don't know about you, but I can't wait. Whenever the date is, we'll be there. But we must bring today to a close. We're 15 minutes over time, and I did promise that we'd be finished by 3, so sorry, Sue. Thank you all for coming. There's been plenty of people here. I hope it's been really helpful to you. And that feel free after the event to call up me, Glenn, Leacher, and if there's any statements that, if you did it on the web portal, the Survey Monkey thing I did, we've already got that. If not, I'll be circulating a link on the group later on, because any information, how insignificant it might seem to you, could be very useful to us to ultimately get the answer that you want and that we want for our wider industry. So thank you all very much for coming. And until the next time, if you just want to finish.
No, I mean, today genuinely has been very helpful and informative, and certainly I can take that back. And to echo Matthew's words, we will absolutely keep in dialogue and communication, and if it would be helpful if we could coordinate the questions so that we can make sure that we get the answers effectively back and ensure that. But I will commit to absolutely having much more frequent communication with you. So thank you, and thank you for your time, and thank you for attending today.